Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ian Proud. I am the peacemonger. I was a former British diplomat holding a senior position at the British Embassy in Moscow from 2014 to 2019, and have experience in other parts of the world, often in crisis situations. But when I left in 2020, I was really worried how bad Western, and particularly British diplomacy, had drifted off track. And I became the peacemonger. So that is a little bit about me. If you're enjoying these shows, please, at the end of this, if you find it interesting, to like and subscribe to this channel. But today I'm delighted to welcome onto the show Andrei Martyanov, who is based in but a former Russian military officer from way back in the day, who is an expert in military strategy and other things. So keen to talk about all those issues today. Andrei, welcome to the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So one of the things I notice with Western leaders, European leaders in particular, less so US leaders now that pivoted under the Trump administration, is that whenever things are going wrong, they come up with a new press line that they all mechanically trot out, when you see them appearing in the press. And the one that's most recently, I think, come out and has been noticeable, has been the one that Russia has only gained about 1% of territory over the space of 2 years. And this must be a sign that Russia is losing in Ukraine. Now, I don't, personally believe that myself, but I'd be interested to get your take on that latest, press line that the Western leaders are putting out.
Well, that's the only capability they have, especially European NATO members. It's primarily PR in all kinds of sometimes, the famous 77th Brigade of this psychological operations from United Kingdom and things of this nature. They don't know how to fight war. And of course, yeah, they forget one simple thing, though. It's not about a territory, it never was. But if they go into the territorial issue, granted that none of them really ever taught or learned any kind of real strategy written by real military professionals, is the fact that Russians actually took not 1%, they took four new territories, and which are in Russian grasp, which amounts to about 20% of the Ukrainian territory. And it was never their territorial quest. That's what they do not understand. No, they probably do understand. It's just that, they lie to themselves too. They are high on their own supply, that they begin to believe in all those things. And we have to understand, average journal in the world, and I'm not going to be talking about Hunter Thompson, of course, how he describe the media when in the fear and loathing in Las Vegas. There's a lot of profanity in there, but you have to understand, most of those people, they don't have a clue actually what is going on, and the only thing they do, they have all those degrees in wordsmithing at the best, and so they will not understand actually the dynamics of their operations. They don't understand objectives. They don't understand what kind of resources are matched to those objectives. And so, yeah, they will continue to do this. They will continue to lie. That's what they do. We have, if since you are in United Kingdom, we have the whole establishment of the British tabloids. I don't think Britain has any serious media or press, existing there. Most of it is tabloid, including Times and Financial Times, what have you. And they will continue to lie because there are a number of factors which dictate them to do this. First, they are obviously controlled by their respective governments and whatever the organization, like in the United States. I believe it is Washington Post, which is known as the CIA outlet, and New York Times, some people say it's FBI, but yeah, that's pretty much what they are. And they will continue to do this. So yeah, they will be inventing new things. They will be looking for all kinds of the ways to basically twist the truth, because they know they lost war, basically in military and political terms.
I agree with that assessment. And actually, the really interesting thing for me is how bizarre some of the tabloid, in particular, headlines are, from Russians using spare parts from washing machines
Yeah, yeah,
to
oh,
equip their
absolutely.
tanks to driving in golf buggies because they can't afford any vehicles.
Yeah.
But you never hear any negative coverage about the state of the Ukrainian military, apart from the fact that they don't have enough people and they should enlist 18-year-olds. I mean, it's a rhetorical question, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
But why is there a complete blackout of discussing the quite dreadful state, it seems to me, of the Ukrainian military? With even the Ukrainians have said that 600,000, I believe, are considered to be missing without leave, AWOL, effectively.
Yeah.
Um,
That's another part, which I am on the record since the start of the special military operation, is that average Western journal is a war criminal. They are in establishment. They are pretty much, there's no difference between the, Tokyo Rose or, Goebbelsonian accomplices in the genocide. And so now what we have, the Western media, all those CNNs, BBCs, ABCs and what have you, they were behind the, what essentially is the committing their suicide by a cop. They killed more than 2 million Ukrainian soldiers, including some NATO soldiers, in tens of thousands, actually. It's not just NATO, it's all kinds of now human trash they get from Colombia, from the cartels and things like that. And so they have to understand they are culpable. Average Cretin like Piers Morgan, for example, or anybody who goes out every day and lies and pushes for the same thing with the continuation of the war, they commit the crime akin to Goebbelsonian propaganda ministry. And we know Goebbels and Marta, they committed the suicide, they killed their own children. And so they knew what was coming, despite the fact that Goebbels obviously didn't do anything like killing people, or, he was screwing a lot of women in all kinds of different places, but he didn't commit personally any kind of the crime of this nature. But he knew he was he was culpable in the genocide. And so they killed we have at least probably in real terms, it's around 2.5 million people killed in the Ukrainian armed forces. We have about 2 million wounded at least. And we have the essentially sperm bank of nation being destroyed. And those cretins from media, they do not understand that actually this is the largest war in Europe and Eurasia since World War II. And they are the champions of that. They are the champions. And fact is, let's face it, most of them, they hate Russian gods. For them, Russians are subhumans. For example, I know in the eyes of very many people there, I am, Untermensch. And so for them, they don't care. But at some point of time, they have to recognize that what they did, because they were the champions of that, they killed millions of people. Their hands are totally, covered in blood, up to the elbows, and so they are as criminals, as the committing crimes against humanity, as anybody of the NATO planners who, for example, managed to kill. And they primarily succeeded in their atrocities against civilian people, like it was happening in the Kursk Oblast, where they're still uncovering mass graves of the Russian civilians executed in the SS style. So there you go. They wanted it. They wanted the show. Now they are actually desperate. That's one of the main reasons also why they continue to lie, because they have no other option. I mean, you probably saw, I hope you've seen when George Galloway basically stamped on this low-life creature like Piers Morgan. He stated that you are the ones, your hands are, covered in blood. And he was talking about Gaza, of course, and but what we see now, what is happening in former Ukraine, it is a catastrophe. It's humanitarian catastrophe, but they wanted it, they got it, and now they have no way back.
why do you think they keep clinging on and resisting Trump's efforts to bring the war to an end? I mean, surely if you're a rational human being, recognizing the massive failures that you made up until this point, you might still, somewhere in the back of your tiny mind, not talking about yours, but talking about their tiny minds, think, well, actually, for our own survival, it would be better to stop now and cut our losses? Why do you see that they are unable, people like Kaya Kallas, Alexander Stubb, Keir Starmer, and so many others, unable to kind of put an end to it?
You need to start with this thing about Europe. There is Europe and there is UK. Starmer is, yeah, if you look attentively at the line of all those British UK prime ministers, as of lately, one of them, like Liz Truss, being absolutely, I mean, she's downright moron. But I mean, that's what evidently British wants to say. But if you scratch any European, I mean continental Europe, especially German, and especially Baltic states. You scratch them, there's Wehrmacht and SS behind them. If you look attentively at Germans, for example, they never recovered from the fact that they have been those Untermensch, and many people still do not recognize the fact, which I'm pushing through constantly. Every single data a point and shows, and of course Russians know it. Germans, especially West Germans, we're not talking about former GDR, East Germany. They hate Russians. They really hate that. It's so obvious that Scholz or the Merz, or apart from the fact that they we're not talking about this PhD in geometry and Alina Baerbock. I mean, they all have their Wehrmacht OSS blood in their bloodlines, and Germans, they never recovered from this. And the only thing they care about they have been reduced essentially to the state of cattle. They do like their Bundesliga and beer, but that's about it. And now, when the economic situation also comes down to what it's happening right now, the industrialization, unemployment, all kinds of things, including immigration, and they find always, what Untermenschen, on the East, we hate them. And especially since Soviet Union wrongly assumed that, yeah, by providing, and energy, affordable energy to FRG, the Western Germany, and things of this nature will somehow pacify them. No, they are in the state of the complete civilizational decline, and their feeling of hatred. Yes, it's true for majority of Europeans. You look at France, you look at Italy, majority of them don't like Russians. Simple as that. It's not just policies. It's the fact that this is majority. I don't know how large majority, but majority. It could be 60, it could be 65 to 80% of population. They just don't like Russians. They do not recognize them as the European civilization. They do not recognize them for, so as people who want to share the dirt, sewage, and on the smell on the streets of Paris, and, especially woke agenda and the Satanism, which they essentially killed the classic European civilization. So, but yeah, for them, Russians are subhumans, and that's the reality of it. And many people still cannot face this fact, but that's the reality.
I've lived in Russia for 4.5 years, and I have to say, I mean, I found Russian people very, very nice. I don't think the government really liked me very much because I worked at the British Embassy. They probably still don't like me very much because I authorized so many sanctions, but we'll move beyond that. But I mean, I still have lots of Russian friends. I still keep in contact with them. They were always very warm towards me. If you're warm to people, I generally warm back to you. And yeah, okay, Russian people are different from British people, but then Portuguese people are different from British people, Italian people, and French people are very, very different from British
French
people. So
people
what does it
are
even
different
what does
from
it even
everybody.
matter anyway? Well, what does it even? I mean, I just don't understand. I really don't understand the blind, it seems to me, hatred of Russian people. I mean, I just don't understand it. I mean, where, because I get asked this a lot, why do the Brits hate the Russians so much? But why do you think the Brits hate the Russians so much, and the other Europeans hate the Russians so much?
I mean, it's World War II. It's the do not forget that when we talk about Operation Barbarossa and invasion of the Soviet Union by Many people still consider this, oh yeah, Germans, wait a minute. No, as Tolstoy in War and Peace wrote that there are forces of the dozen of languages. This is exactly what happened in 1941. Hitler wasn't alone. Everybody forgets about 500,000 strong Finnish army, which participated, by the way, in genocide of Leningrad, in blockade. What about Hungarian armies? What about Italian ones? French SS divisions, Netherlands, and even Blue Division from Spain. It was all Europe which was doing this in 1941. French surrendered pretty much, without much putting much of a fight, And again, if not for Churchill, for all kinds of wrong reasons probably, but at least he had enough the fortitude and, in brain, to calculate that he needed, that Germans, have to end Wehrmacht and the Fourth Reich should go to the east. He knew that he has to have Soviet Union on his side, and he correctly calculated it. And it was a very different attitude among British people during the World War II towards Soviet Union. Especially, it's beautifully documented by Molly Punter Downes, it's called London War Notes. It was a beautiful thing going on there, But do not forget, for Britons, as Mr. Lavrov last week stated, this is the only country in the world which put their prefix "great" to its name on its own. United Kingdom lost basically their empire. And Russians didn't, So, and this is the thing, which is one of the greatest British historians, and he held obviously the chair of the Shakespearean Society for a reason, which is such an honor. Of course, Corelli Barnett, in his collapse of the collapse of the British power, this is a masterpiece of the military and political history. He described it beautifully. How United Kingdom, Great Britain, essentially because of the World War II, just went out of this basically status of the great powers, and they were looking at Soviet Union, which recovered and continued to move ahead. And even when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russians were supposed to go away. They were supposed to go the way of the British Empire, but Russians didn't go away. And this is the whole thing. That's Europe, and. But there is also the interesting situation with which Russians keep in mind constantly, especially Russians of my generation. Great Britain was a lie. No matter what you say about Churchill, no matter what you say about all those machinations of the political top of Great Britain, we were lies. We were big three. It was the bond which was kind of how to say it was really unbreakable. But the realities of the political, economic, and other lives are such that the only thing they have left is the Economist and Financial Times, which publish all kinds of the economic pseudo BS, about how great things are in Europe, which they are catastrophic, while Russians doing well, not without their problems, but they're doing okay. Economically, Russia is developing, and then you suddenly see there, which I repeat constantly, these are closing salvos of the World War II. This is the settling of the unsettled accounts. And that is why we have to understand. Ukraine was merely a ram against Russia. And it was always about Russia. It had never been about communists or Soviet Union. It has been always about Russia and Russian people. And that is why many people don't know. In his closing speech in 1945, Joseph Stalin, if anybody cares to read his speech, he stated a profound thing there, which is absolutely true and rings true today. He said the 1,000-year-long struggle of Slavic tribes for their survival has been finished. We won. Essentially that's the main thing. And you say, oh, why would the communist leader, say such things? Well, because he understood it never was about communism. It was about annihilation of Russians and getting to their territories, getting their resources. And today, United Kingdom through all those useless and illiterate things like Chatham House, MI6 or whatever the funny, the kindergarten level analytical, policy things in there. They bet the house on that. United Kingdom bet the house. And guess what? The bet has burned. And this is the air of desperation and hatred. And can you imagine that? I mean, so, and here we are today.
I see it every day in the British press and on the British TV. I mean, well, we can have any sort of problem, our electricity prices are going up, our trains aren't running on time, somebody gets robbed in the street, and somehow someone somewhere will be able to introduce Putin's name into the equation as being a sort of a cause
Yeah, Putin
of
is
all of these
responsible for
problems.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
Putin is
I know.
responsible.
He's a man of incredible powers, it seems. But I mean,
Omnipotent, omnipotent, I can tell you.
omnipotent, exactly. But Ukrainians are Slavs, right? I mean,
Well, yeah, yeah.
this is go ahead, go ahead.
No, I mean they're Slavs, but again, Poles are also Slavs, and but Poles hate Russians. Well, not all Poles, but their elite is just absolutely abhors Russians, Russian gods. So it's in a racial sense, it's irrelevant in the sense that in the end, as somebody correctly interpreted this dead horse of John McCain, his phrase that Russia is the gas station masquerading as a country, somebody rephrased it very correctly, a beautiful thing. They stated that Russia is civilization masquerading as the country, and it's multinational. Granted, 80% of the population of Russia are Slavic Russians, ethnic Russians like me. But the point is, it doesn't matter. You could be Slav, you still could be, Hitler accomplice, and that's what, for example, Western Ukraine was essentially. And Poles, I mean, look at Russian Polish history. It's constant, invasion, death and blood. So, and Dostoevsky absolutely correctly stated about Slavs and his the writer's diary. It's not complimentary, to put it mildly, to all Slavs. So it's a part of this is basically ethnic, racial, and what have you issue, but primarily it's cultural too. Russians are completely different people in the sense that there is even through territory, even through the especially 20th century's accomplishments and things of this nature, that they are great people. They know they are great people. It's not that they are going and try to constantly prove to us, to everybody that we are great. It's just Russia continues to do what she does, and it sits on the 1/6 of the territory of the world. It commands more than 30% of the resources, critical resources of the world, from energy to rare earth minerals to what have you. And that is, as Alexander III stated, the Tsar, they will always hate us. They will hate our bigness, as he stated, because we're too big. We cannot fit into these small European minds, and that has been now established. And the basically Russia and whatever Europe today, they parted the ways, and the tectonic shift. Again, you are correct. Russians. It doesn't mean that Russians hate Europeans. No. But Russians hate European political and ideological structures, and they do not want to do anything with whatever is now happening in Europe. And that is the fundamental thing, which didn't exist at that time in Soviet Union, because Soviet Union was still viewing itself like part of the Western civilization, things like that. Now Russians don't want to do anything with Europe, and that happened. It's civilizational tectonic shift. But then again, we are facing today a collapse of the 500-year domination of the European civilization. We live in the world which was shaped by Europeans, but it's over now. And here we are. And what can I say? It's a historic moment of unprecedented scale.
I guess my follow-up question to that is, I mean, do you think somewhere deep down the Europeans hate the Ukrainians too? Because if the Ukrainians weren't Slavs, maybe they would have been happy for the war to finish after a month, which it could have done in Istanbul. in March of 2022. Do you think deep down there's that same, I use the term racism, but you can use whatever term you like, hatred of the
Metaphysical,
Ukrainians
yeah, it's more than racism.
subliminally?
It's metaphysical in essence. And no, majority of populations, even in 2017, the Sputnik were taking, at that time you were still able to travel freely and all that. They were taking the poll among European nations. Do you consider the Russians to be European people? England, France, Germany, Poland. Only Poles, 70% of Poles considered Russians European people at that time. Majority of the rest of it, especially French, I believe something like 19% of French, I don't remember exactly, something around this number, considered Russians to be European. So the rest of it, listen, Russians are Asiatic horde, is Baron de Custine not correctly, I mean, stated in his memoirs, if you wish, that scratch the Russian, you will get the Tatar and things of this nature. Russians are Asiatic, barbaric people, period. They don't have toilets. They steal the chips from the washing machines. They are, what? So yeah, they are so backward. They don't have LGBTQ whatever walk dictatorship. They are still prefer to breed like normal people, men and women. So yeah, Russians are backward people. You have to understand it. And everything what happened, Russians flew into space, developed nuclear power stations, and things of those hypersonic weapons. It has been all stolen from the West. So, and
Yeah,
that has to be understood. This is how average European views Russians. How and for them, Ukrainians were just merely a tool, but just stick it to them, and for all different reasons. On part of Germany, it's the basically depression and suppressed, complex of inferiority, but because their cars actually sucks, and in reality, and they losing the industry, so they cannot forgive the demolition of the Third Reich and things of this nature. For British, we know what it is. It's, well, we lost our empire. Look at us now. But no, look at this. Look at those Russians. And you've been to Moscow, you've been to all over the Russia. And the thing which they will never forgive is that, and that is the most horrifying thing for them, is that Russians begin to live better than most Europeans. That is a no. The European welfare, social guarantees, standard of living, which was the object of the adoration and desire for so many decades. Granted, most of it was based on the cheap Soviet energy, which allowed to be competitive. Suddenly it's gone. And so can you imagine now, if you take average, and not only European, if you take average dude from New York who thinks that New York is the it thing, you get them into Moscow, St. Petersburg, they are suppressed, they are depressed, because, and not only there, get them into Yekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, they look at those modern, beautiful, clean, safe cities, and they cannot believe what they're seeing, because for them, Russians should live in and go to the outhouses. That's what Ukrainian press also, influences all those people. They have to be driving Zaporozhets still, and things of this nature. And it's obviously very difficult to bear for people in Europe, and that is exactly what is happening. So it's a combination of factors, but if that's as always, it goes down to the metaphysical level. It's many things, they are really irritated.
yeah. Well, I've been to all of those cities that you mentioned, and I enjoyed them all greatly. I particularly loved Ekaterinburg. I don't know why it just kind of it really attached itself to me. I just really love it in Yekaterinburg. Something about being in not even in the middle. It's a vast continental country. There's enormous sky. I just really, really have a passion for that city. But I mean, to go back to the Ukrainians, I mean, I do still think that actually the Europeans don't really care about Ukrainian people. I just
No, they don't.
if they did, they would have wanted it. I mean,
Well,
if
Ukrainians
it,
are too.
Yeah,
Ukrainians are a tool. It's merely a tool. It will be disposed of as either use scalpel as disposed it or condom after use, and it's already happening because in the end, United States basically is the main driver behind was main driver behind all this catastrophe.
yeah. Because I mean, if young French men were being dragged off the streets, beaten up, and put into minibuses against their will and sent to the front lines, Paris would come to a standstill, and people would say, "Well, this can't be accepted." And yet, it happens in Ukrainian cities all the time, and nobody in the Western press even talks about it, which is quite shocking. But I mean, I think the same it was also true of World War II. I mean, lots of people, I think, falsely make the analogy with Munich, peace for our time. But actually, the truth was that I think that the reason that Hitler was allowed to invade the Sudetenlands was because the French and the British didn't want to get their hands dirty saving some Czechs. Basically, just okay,
That was
let
part
Hitler
of
have it.
the issue, yeah.
Yeah,
That was part of the issue. And there's another factor which many people still do not recognize, even before Churchill came to power. Especially the so-called conservative, there is really nothing conservative about them, of the British and French circles. First, they obviously were sabotaging Maxime Litvin's idea of the security, European security as he was proposing, and they were hoping that Hitler will attack Soviet Union first. And they never could forgive Stalin that in the end it ended with the demolition of France and obviously humiliation of the unimaginable level. They still never recovered that from this. And United Kingdom, Great Britain, suddenly standing alone, which it did. So, and again, it was Churchill who had enough, I mean, courage and foresight to his famous speech. We know this, his famous, we'll fight on the beaches, we'll fight on,
mm,
so we'll never surrender. And that was the moment of the national, triumph in many respects for Britons. And then, of course, the Soviet Union and Britain became the allies. And but yeah, the rest of the Europe, they just folded, period. Why? Why would they have, why would they be fighting somebody who essentially, which is correctly stated on many occasions, Hitler was expressing the ideas of Europe about Soviet Union and Russians. Why would they resist that? So they folded, not biggie. So as you can see yourself, Vichy government was doing fine. French, for Paris was still full of light and joy, croissants, the love, whatever. So they did fine. They Oradour, oh, don't pay attention to this. Oradour, couple of villages they burned for to keep French in. French agreed. That's what they do. So and that's what we have today. All of it is rooted in the World War II.
but to go back to the point that you made earlier and you hinted at just now, I mean, even when I was in Moscow, and that was after the Ukraine crisis started, there was still a lot of pride in the alliance with the US and Great Britain, formerly Great Britain, during World War II. If you go to
Yeah,
Park Pobyeды, Victory Park, in Moscow, there's that statue of, I don't know why the Frenchman's in there, but
yeah.
there's a Soviet
Behind the main,
soldier.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a Soviet soldier, a British, an American, and some reason, just to make up the
For
numbers, a
some
French
reason, French, yeah.
a Frenchman. And I remember somebody produced a documentary about in Russian for Russian audiences about the delivery of Hurricane fighters to Arkhangelsk, I think it was, during World War II as part of the Arctic convoys. And it got a great reception, at the time,
Yeah.
and there's real pride in that shared history. And even in 2016, Princess Anne came out to Arkhangelsk actually for the Arctic Convoys Memorial. Putin gave some Arctic Convoys veterans medals at 2012 when he visited London for the 2012 Olympics. He obviously went to see judo with David Cameron. I mean, it's still immense pride about that shared history and all, a sense of kind of mourning and grief that somehow, well, why aren't we friends anymore?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And there is a famous placard by Kukrynytsin. They were famous trio of Soviet. They were caricaturists, but they were also making great World War II placards. The propaganda thing. And there's a very famous the placard about that the brother nations decided. Well, it rhymes in Russian. Задумали народы братья назначить в небе. I don't remember. So it's basically brothers nation decided to, set up the date over Berlin. From this date, there will be very many sorrow for Nazi Germany. So there was like, British, Avro Lancaster and Russians, TB, and they shake hands and the bombs fly down, on Nazi Germany. So there was a law. It still is. There still is. And I remember Russian outrage where they didn't allow to commemorate this in London, the Arctic convoys also, when Russian embassy wanted to present the state orders of Russia, the Great Patriotic War order and things like that. And they didn't allow those veterans to travel to Russia to commemorate the 80th anniversary. Yeah, which is like it's atrocity, So the same happened with the American veterans, which was absolutely, this is unacceptable. But yeah, that's how they hate Russia. And masks are off, and it's all for the better, So there's no anymore this ballet around things and around issues, and we know that. Well, MI6, Machiavelli. She's not Machiavelli. She's Dobrovolskaya. Her father, her granddad was Nazi collaborator. And yeah, here she is, So she's the director of the MI6. She's DEI, higher, obviously, diversity, equality. So, but yeah, here I have, that's even in Britain, and there are still many sympathizers there, with the Nazis and things like that. So, except for the other part, which is we don't even want to go there. So they basically killed United Kingdom and killed English people essentially. And so, but yeah, this is what we have. It's all coming through, And yeah, I love how they say, "Oh yeah, I had the labor of coming to terms with my grandfather who was a Nazi." So yeah, sure, yeah, I'm sure you basically said that no, it's not. We do not understand what you have done. I accept you as my father, but in reality, or grandfather, but in reality, you never shaped me. Well, yes, they do. Do not forget that military history for NATO, military history, including for all those morons from the King's College and from the whatever the Academy of the forces in Great Britain, was written by people who have been fully employed official employees of the U.S. Army Department of History. And among those names, wow, Mr. Manstein, Mr. Manteuffel, Hauser, all those, Wehrmacht and SS, Panzer commanders, they wrote operational, tactical, and other visions for NATO, including for British. And then you have this moron there, the Hamish Gordon, whatever his name. He has a degree in agriculture, but for some reason in Telegraph, he positions himself as the tank commander, okay? Which he was, evidently. He ran the platoon tank.
Hamish to Breton Gordon.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Oh my
good
God,
Lord.
yes. Oh, he's dreadful.
Dreadful, not the word. The guy is a cretin, basically, and the Russians already made the laughing stock out of him, and
Yeah.
uh, and that's the whole point. You cannot explain, dudes. Learn the real war, learn the real World War II, learn the real strategy, learn the way not it was presented to you, which you were just, basically praying to all those and worshiping those German generals and marshals. Look at the facts. They don't
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah, I was going to say I've got a really good I've got a really good book here. It's about the space race. Thing is in here.
Oh,
It's Red Moon Rising. It's about how the Soviet Union beat the USA, but basically in getting the Sputnik launched into space before the Americans were able to. the long and the short of it is that basically because that the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy were competing with each other, they couldn't get their acts together. But the key point was the U.S. science, program was led by, or largely led by
Yeah,
the former Germans who'd been involved in building the V1 Doodlebugs and the V2
yeah,
rockets that rained down on Britain, which was
yeah, and
quite
yeah,
disappointing.
and it's a well-known fact. United States got most of them. Russians also had some German engineers working, but they were not working as the leaders. They were working as the subordinates of Korolev and his group. But
Yeah, yeah,
Russians
yeah.
got on. They got only a couple of the live V1s, missiles, and that's about it. United States got all technical documentation, all scientists on that. And there is a wonderful movie which called The Right Stuff. It's also not only wonderfully historically, but it shows how when the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik, the German scientists in United States, they were sitting, standing in the circle like, damn, we are getting bet on the wrong horse. So it was so funny. It's a wonderfully humorous movie too, So wonderful film, very long, and it's called The Right Stuff. Excellent cast, and it's about their space race.
Yeah, no, I shall have to definitely look that up. But so to go back to kind of the whole sort of alliance spirit and which still persisted. I mean, Nicholas Soames, who was a member of Parliament, Churchill's grandson, it came out to Moscow for the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, Great Patriotic War for Victory Day in Moscow, and he took part. Well, virtually, he had a black and white photograph of Churchill for the the immortal regiment sort of
Yeah,
parade and
yeah.
stuff, and it actually kind of went down really well. I mean, do you think ultimately? I mean, because I've always felt that actually, Russians, including actually, even though they would never admit it publicly, and not right now at least, would actually like to have friendly relations with Europe, but only on terms of genuine equality and respect. I mean, I still believe that actually, if we can get rid of the stupid cretins, leading European countries and actually end this war, that actually it would be possible to develop some sort of more stable, even friendly kind of relationships between Russia and the West. Or do you think that is just way too naive and optimistic?
It's not naive. It's just the fact that political system of Europe, including Great Britain, United Kingdom is different, obviously, because it's not the part of the European Union. And but this present generation, political generation, you cannot talk to them. Period. It's simple as that. So, and that is why, although being on equal and respectful terms, Russians repeated ad nauseam, including Mr. Lavrov, or Vladimir Putin himself. They know, and that is why very many top Russian officials now not hedge, they essentially say, sometime in the future, and they know that something really big has to happen in Europe in both political and economic terms before you know what. As I already stated, Russians will never now forgive Germany, for example, for German tanks in Kursk. You just cannot do this. They crossed all red lines, and everybody knows that Kursk adventurism was
Yes,
basically
the biggest
planned by
tank battle in
British.
history.
Yeah, and they also, it was planned by British, which obviously they went in, killed 80,000 of Ukrainian troops, and the only thing they marked it with was obviously atrocities against civilian people, like Ruskaya Porечная. They came in the village, gang raped women, and executed men and children even. So these things are. That's it. Russians are never falling for this again. Especially seeing how the Germany behaves itself, and it's over. I think. Russians would rather see Europe, essentially European Union, which is happening, going, kaboom, and disintegrating, and Europeans doing what the Russians think is the case, going for the jugulars of each other. That's what is going to happen. So, but whenever it's, you still have to have the how to say it, strong personality, the person of the, statue. Who look at the political elites in Europe or in the United States. It's a circus, for crying out loud. It's a bunch of the nincompoops running around. Those people, they never held any real job. They never saw any real war. It's just ridiculous. Look at American generals. Good Lord, one more after another, this Kellogg, Keane. It's like, dudes, where have you been studying? What kind of war have you seen? You don't even understand basic strategic things. And you are somehow a general in Pentagon, or at least you have been, and you look at same goes for British and Germans and the old people who, again, we have to keep in mind, and I wrote it in my books, and especially when the last great American who was a true strategist was Eisenhower. The guy who actually stopped the Korean War, and because he was a great general, he was a true strategist, but obviously in the United States, for some reason, people think that he was not. Well, in reality, he was. He understood the whole situation. And the last guy who had at least very exemplary diplomatic corps was, of course, George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr., who had James Baker as the Secretary of the State, and obviously esteemed Jack Matlock, who was the ambassador to Moscow during actually also the collapse of the Soviet Union. You don't have people like this scale anymore. The elite producing machine in the West is broken completely. You get politicians, there are no statesmen, period. There are no statesmen. The only thing they know is how to lie to stay elected, period. That's the only skill they have. No principles, no humanity, no nothing. Just to stay elected and whatever they do, enrich themselves or what have you.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, believe it or not, even though he's 96, I met Jack Matlock in Tbilisi last June. He came out for an
Outstanding
event.
man.
Yeah, he was, and still incredibly sprightly, getting a bit shaky now. He's
Yeah, but
96, but he traveled all the way to Tbilisi from the USA, and yeah, it's great. It's a really great, an honor, really, to kind of have a chance to meet him and talk to him. But to bring it back to the question that we started from, and this is really about strategy, the point about the 1%, 20%, and so on. It's never really been about territory, it seems to me. I mean, well, I mean, at a very operational and tactical level, I mean, the Russian army is kind of not going on the front foot, to minimize kind of battlefield losses, but actually it doesn't really need to make territorial gains anyway, because as it stands, Europe is running out of money. And
yeah.
as you say, its politicians are tearing at each other's jugglers, and the whole system is is falling apart. So what's
Yeah.
happening on the battlefield is entirely secondary to the wider chaos that is being
Well, actually,
unleashed in Europe itself.
it's a main generator of this instability within the NATO ranks, because we have to understand they thought the idea behind NATO planners, if you can call them, because they are not competent people militarily. You cannot compare the academic and experience level of, for example, Russian general staff with anything in Pentagon. They are not in the same league, and I mean it. Sandhurst is not military academy; it's a vocational school. You cannot get the guy with degree in sociology, throw him for 44 weeks into some kind of the dilly-dally thing, and say, "Oh yeah, we have the officer." No, you don't. And especially you don't have armed forces. You have to have many years of academic training and military training. Mr. Gerasimov, Chief of General Staff, he has actually 9 years of academic training behind him. He has the PhD in military science and a master's degree in engineering. So many people don't get it. And so their thing was they read up, they have been BS, they drank the Kool-Aid that, oh yeah, remember Afghanistan, Soviet Union collapsed because of Afghanistan. Soviet Union did collapse because of the Afghanistan, but that's the whole other story. So let's do this thing. Russians will rush with all those big air offensives. They run into Ukraine, they take Ukraine, and then they will be, bogged in the quagmire, which of course we supply weapons, and Russians will bleed, and Putin's regime will fall. That's the thinking. This is kindergarten. Any cretin from Chatham House, he wouldn't understand the first thing about war. They just simply don't know. And as the result, that's their strategy. Russians look at that and say, "Oh, really?" So okay, and of course, none of them ever read Alexander Svechin, whom, for example, Mr. Gerasimov loves to quote. That in the end, it is their not strategy of crushing, it's strategy of exhaustion, which Russians do, and it's like, yep, once you got your gonads into their vices, it's over, and it's just a matter of time. And so we can observe now what is happening, and then tell me who is the better strategist.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we'll draw a line under it. I mean, that's just I could have spoken to you for a good 2 or 3 hours, but it's not the time today. But let's definitely do this again because, as much as anything else, it's nice to talk to a Russian person and realize actually we're not that different. We're
Not
just
that
people.
different.
You know.
No, it's
Uh,
yeah. This except for British cuisine. Other than that, we are good. You know,
well, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Russian cuisine, to be honest, it
it's
is not
also
easy.
yeah, it's bland. But I mean, because of the Caucasus and other places, it kind of
Yes,
absorbed it, and
this is
it's
true.
yeah.
Yeah, you
So
can't
that
be. We love the Georgian, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I do like a pelmeni, but anyway,
no, no, pelmeni is fine. Yeah, but chibureki, that's the whole other story.
Shiboreki is yeah. I like Shiboreki. I can do that.
Oh
Anyway,
boy.
I shall leave it there, my friend. That's genuinely been terrific and enlightening. I hope the readers, watchers have enjoyed it too. As I said, please do like and subscribe if you found this an interesting conversation. I certainly did. I sort of got a lot out of that conversation, and I just want to kind of finish by saying thank you to Andrei for your fellowship, for your conversation today. I hope we can do this again. And yeah, до скорого.
До свидания.
До свидания.